Well, another year and another event to celebrate the wonderful Yorkshire Coast line, and I'm back at Bridlingto, which is kind of, I suppose, one of the major stations on the railway route, and we're here to see the unveiling and the opening of another North Eastern Railway tile map. There I can see ahead of me the frontage and the new buildings that's gathered around it, and the houses over there which took away some of the station some years ago. And of course we've just lost the semaphore signals and colour lights have been put in place, but let's make our way into the station now. People know.
Okay, hello, I'm Rachel Osborne. I'm the Secretary of the Yorkshire Coast Community Rail Partnership.
And we're here for another event at Bridlington Station, this time the unveiling of the restored map here.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. We've got Blue Monday going on over here. We've got the Samaritans here. It's a combined event, but the exciting part is we've got the original tiles from Bridlington Station's NER tiled map have been restored and they're going to be unveiled shortly.
Excellent stuff. I mean, we've seen one at Humberton, haven't we? Just fairly recently, I suppose, being unveiled. Wasn't that a recreation, or I can't remember now?
Humberton is a replica, yeah.
Yeah.
Exact replica of them. That's a brand new one, yeah. I'm just going to get noisy now.
It's all up the atmosphere, yeah.
Alright, yeah.
But yes, I mean, even since we last came to an event at Bridlington, things have changed, haven't they? The old-fashioned semaphore signals have gone, and we've got colour lights, and the track's being rearranged, all sorts.
Yeah.
There's still money being spent on this line, which is good to see, isn't it? Really.
It is. It's good to see investment. Yeah, and the track layout's a lot more tidy now and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, good luck with the event.
Thank you. I'm rather excited.
Good.
It's a dream come true for me.
I've been there years and years ago, a lot of years ago, and I've probably been in the towel factory sometimes, and maybe after the next time around before we'll have to go and play another fight and call it.
Yeah, that's the idea. We're going to have a thing there, the metal podium thing with the information on. Yeah. Are you a bridge now?
No. Oh, I live here, yes. From Bridlingto. I don't know. I know what the Richard said.
Instrumental in saving.
Oh, was they?
Well, on the transport of this month, something a little unusual. I'm going to look at transport, railways in particular, in a large village, or I suppose you could class it as a small town that never had a railway. I'm in North Frodingham, which is kind of very roughly about a third of the way between Bridlington and Hull. Now, the reason I thought I'd visit here is because we've had a couple of features, and indeed on this edition you'll see the opening of the North Eastern Railway maps. They're scattered around the system, many survive, and on them you'll find the North Frodingham branch. A line which was never built. Now why? Why was it never built? Well, let's have a look what was proposed. It was proposed in 1897 and we actually got parliamentary approval to build a branch line to the village of North Frodingham, quite an agricultural centre for the area, so not exactly the kind of tiny little village that wouldn't warrant a railway. The railway would have left just slightly north of Beverley Station and then run through the villages of Tipton, Ralph, Longriston, Leven, Brandersburton and finally North Frodingham. It would have been passed under the light railway order, and I think I'll just visit up this little road here. We'll have a little look at something. And would have seen a regular service. Plans, I say, were obviously afoot to get the line through, but by 1903 the whole project had been abandoned. There was some thought of the North Eastern Railway building it as narrow gauge. The land around here is slightly marshy and wet, so it would be logical to have a lighter railway to cross that land. Would have meant less infill and so forth. But it would not necessarily have been a branch terminal. The year later, in 1898, the Bridlington and North Frodingham light railway was proposed. This would have run from Carnaby and pass through the various villages along the coast, from roughly between Bridlington and North Frodingham, I should say. Sorry, my diction as I'm walking along. It was never built, but it would have meant that presumably North Ferriby would have been a through station, running an alternative route between Bridlington and Beverley. Of course, this was kind of the case anyway, as you had two alternative routes between Driffield and Beverley, so it would have simply had a third one. I suspect much of the proposal was A, to pick up the agricultural traffic which was available, but also to have a quick look at the possibility that some of those villages along the coast would develop in a more touristy way. Tourist traffic was beginning to become something of a thing. Just looking across this road here, making sure I don't get run over. There we go. Of course, they have slightly developed since then. There's a number of caravan parks, but erosion has also played its part in there. Now, I'm looking across some fields here. The only indication of where the station would have been for the Bridlington line was going to be to the south of the road down to Beeford. Well, I'm just roughly here as to which position and where it would have been, presumably a little bit further down from where I'm stood, which is more or less the centre of the village. And the question, I suppose, really is, were they proposing to link the two lines together? As I say, the Bridlington line was proposed a year after the Act of Parliament for the North Frodingham branch, so it would seem pointless not to join the two lines together. And as I say, the North Eastern Railway abandoned the project in 1903, deciding that the motor buses, which were now becoming a lot more reliable and able to move around the place, they were providing a sufficient service to do what a railway would do at a fraction of the cost. So let's have another look down through North Frodingham. As I say, I took a little detour off the main road through the village to have a brief look at approximately where we might have found the Bridlington light railway. Whether the Bridlington railway ever went before Parliament, I'm not completely certain. I can find no record of that. Simply it was a proposal, and maybe it was decided that proposal wasn't a runner, so it was abandoned. Right, I'm coming down now through here onto the main road. It is a rather large village. It's unusually in this modern day. There are no shops. There's a pub that it's largely one of these villages that presumably was extremely busy back in the day with the agriculture around here. And I'm just passing a bus stop now to prove that there really is. How often these buses run I couldn't say, but East Yorkshire bus services. Yeah, back in the day when it was an agricultural village, it was presumably been a lot busier. Now it's very quiet during the day, so I suspect really it's just a dormitory area for the nearby towns. You're not far from Hull in terms of a commute. Just past the primary school there, North Frodingham Primary School, which shows that there is some degree of residential dwellings around here. I can see by the various houses the age of the village. It's not. There are sections of the village which are obviously new housing, but largely it's period properties, and lining the main street as was the way of the villages around the Holderness area. Many of them actually backing on at one point to agricultural land of various sorts, and we just pass this area here called Manor Croft, which is just to belie the fact that I mentioned there's not much in the way of new properties. It appears to be new built probably on the land where here we have a bus stop. Just to prove, there are 4 buses a day in a direction running to Driffield. Where they go in the other direction I'd have to have a look, but you can get to Driffield from here. Right, just cross over again onto a patch of green land. I'm looking here to see if we can see anything in the way of a bus timetable for either direction. So I'm not sure where the other one goes. Possibly Bridlington, I think it's the Driffield to Bridlington. Actually, now I think that it will be, because I have caught it to visit the town of Beeford. Now Beeford would have had a station. Beeford is quite another large village which has largely succumbed to being just a passing point on the road. There's a priority post box here next to a building which I would put money on the fact was probably a post office in days gone by. Where I'm going is looking approximately maybe where the North Eastern Railway station would have been. Past a farm, just thought someone was following me there, but no, it's a piece of chocolate wrapping blowing along and rattling behind me. Now, here we can see a sign, a road sign for Bransburton and Beverley. Now, that would suggest to me that that would be a position down there where the railway would have come into the village. Interesting, it's Branders Burton, 2 words, whereas these days it's classed as Branders Burton, 1 word. I'll just cross the road here. So there's a market cross, fine old market cross, good old example of days gone by. And have an interesting window display in a house there. Again I would put money on the fact that that was not always just a house, but was actually at some point a shop serving the village. Now they go out to be past some much newer buildings, possibly 60s, possibly 70s, with then starting to open land again. And again, this would seem to me to be where that station would have been built. The line would have come in from this direction, and presumably they would not bother to cut across the main street through the middle of the village with its associated demolition work. So it would have not logically been built over this side. This appears to be a kind of a playing field now of some sort. But as we go through it, look, the road does bend past it as we go along, and it's actually his house. It says number 10, but nonetheless it's an open field, and therefore would seem logical. That's a potential place where the line would have come in and stopped, handy for the village centre, but not actually breaking up the main road or causing for major demolition. I think we can safely assume that if there's nothing there now, there was nothing there back then. So what other reasons would there be for not opening the line? Well, as I say, the passenger traffic, the North Eastern area considered would be handled far better by using buses. But in terms of freight traffic, just outside the village, and we'll see if we can see it if I just wander around this corner here, was the Driffield Canal, emanating from the River Hull and taking traffic up to the town of Driffield. The canal head, the water basin for the canal at Driffield, is, well, I mean, give or take a spit straight across the road from the Driffield station. So transshipment would have been something that could easily be done there. There'd be no point in building a North Frodingham line with, I think it was slightly proposed at some time, a spur going up to the canal for transshipment. It would serve no purpose. At the other end of the line to Beverley, there was plenty of rails to serve the River Hull and the traffic from there, and at Driffield then, heading north, again, no real reason to do it. So I'm coming around the corner now. Past more, I mean, the architecture of the village is lovely. It's real, solid buildings now. Coming around now to perhaps the only place in the village where there's a kind of a business, I suppose. And it's the petrol station. Now the petrol station is effectively also a shop for various agricultural things. It's a food like that, which does seem a bit strange. It seems like the sort of thing that would be perfectly adapted for that. There we are, planning application for something there. Erection of 5 dwellings, so building still taking place in the village. There's a bit of pinkness, and that's presumably the land where they would have built just up there to life. But we're going out of the village now, and perhaps about another half mile further on, roughly, is the canal now. It is being restored as a Driffield Canal. It's been shut to navigation for many years, but this is the limit of navigation at the moment. You can flap around in a boat at Driffield itself, but if you're coming up and joining the rest of the waterway system, then this is as far as you can get. There even been there's a couple of bridges have been put in that were obviously once movable swing bridges and so forth. They're now far too low to get anything over, particularly at Wansford, which is not to be confused with the Wansford in Cambridgeshire, where the Mean Valley Railway runs to. So once that's been sorted out, it'll be a swiftish job to get the locks back in place to get into Driffield. At the moment, North Frodingham, its only non-road means of transport, remains its canal. Just going past another building here, and it's interesting that many of the buildings on the main street, as I mentioned earlier, are indeed, that cargo path, are indeed farms and not just houses. So you can tell that behind Main Street was agricultural land. And actually I'm just going past that sign I mentioned earlier, Brandersburton, to see that on this side of the sign it is 2 words, Brandersburton. And let's just look at the other side again. Yeah, interesting that it's spelt in 2 different ways. So Brandersburton, if I'm coming from the Beeford side, if I'm going from the Driffield side, Brandersburton's 1 word. So there you go. there's always something of interest if you keep your eyes open, I find. So back up the main street to the car. I hope you've enjoyed this rather unusual looking at a closed railway that never even opened. But next time you look at a map and see the North Frodingham branch, you'll have a little bit more history and background. Don't forget to listen to Transported, the radio version. It's every 4th Wednesday on BCB Radio 106.6 FM in the Bradford area, and elsewhere you can find us on the internet, complete with Listen Again.